Welcome, everyone. Welcome to Power Skills 2021 Courage Strikes Back, hosted by the Career Advising and Transition Services Office at the School of Continuing Studies. Power Skills is a free 3-day virtual career summit that is sure to inspire you, to motivate you, to create, and to connect you with such a dynamic series of sessions. My name is Emily Salvi from the Career Advising and Transition Services Office at the School of Continuing Studies at McGill, and I'm happy to introduce you to my colleague in the team, Niall. Introduce you to International Society to help all Black alumni embrace the challenges and triumphs that we face after leaving McGill. On behalf of CATS and the MBAA, welcome to Career Transitions, How to Pivot During a Pandemic. I'm so pleased to introduce you to Vice President and co-founder Sandrine Nibari Kobeka, who will introduce today's moderator.
Thank you so much, Emily and Nayo and the CATS team. We're really excited to be a part of Power Skills 2021. My name is Sandrine, and I'm a co-founder and vice president of the MBAA. And it's my pleasure to introduce our guests today. Priscilla Jabouin. As a dream career expert, Priscilla's passion is to help creative professional women feel more fulfilled and happy in their life and career. After her own need for a career change in 2010, Priscilla returned to complete her Master of Arts in Counseling Psychology. From that moment, she embraced her new path as a career development professional. As an international workshop presenter, holistic counselor, and career coach, Priscilla integrates her advanced degrees in psychology and education, her advanced yoga teacher training, and in-depth knowledge of yogic philosophy to create holistic coaching programs and workshops for her diverse clientele. Her mission is to inspire as many people as possible to wake up to a life and a career they love. And also joining us all the way from London is Lionel Sayep. Lionel graduated from McGill University's Desautels Faculty of Management with a Bachelor of Commerce in 2013. Following graduation, Lionel started his career at Goldman Sachs in the investment banking division in London, where he worked in M&A transactions, debt and equity offerings in the natural resources sectors. Since then, he's joined Eloise Investment Partners, the largest private equity fund globally in 2018, where he is currently an investment professional. And moderating the conversation is my colleague, fellow MBA executive, Johan Rahimali. He's our VP Finance.
Well, thank you very much, Sandrine, and I'll start right away with questions. Maybe starting with you, Priscilla, and the questions of voice, to you both, Sandrine, Priscilla, and Lionel. So it's been mostly a year since the start of the pandemic, and our lives have changed considerably, and how have you managed in the pandemic? How has your work life changed, and what kind of changes have you seen maybe with people you work with on a daily basis, and in the industries you deal with in general, clients for you, Priscilla, and in the job market as a whole. So how can you essentially thrive in that challenging environment and uncertain year?
Okay, thank you, Johan. So there were lots of questions in what you just asked me, so I'll start first with how I managed the pandemic. I think that this definitely toppled my life, but I do have an optimistic perspective of life, and I just told myself, how do I make the best of this? And while the career development field became extremely busy, because as most of you know, a lot of people were losing their jobs, and I actually took a step back. I took a step back and I asked myself, what do I actually need right now? And I got that I needed to take care of myself. And I think that people who have taken a step back to make sure that they're okay, I think that there's the ones who have probably like flown through this situation and have been okay. In terms of, so as I mentioned, like, I think you asked about how things have changed. Like, I think that there was definitely a lot of fear. So when things kind of just really started, I say, going crazy in last March, there was a lot of fear around, careers. People were losing jobs right and left. There was a lot of uncertainty. And then in
I was working at that time with a lot of people who were already looking for work. So there was a lot of anxiety about what would happen next. And what I noticed, excuse me, is that a lot of the fears that people had before the pandemic, so the fears on the job search that there was a lot of competition or maybe there weren't jobs out there, et cetera, are actually the same fears that people have now. And so it was more of, I found like what was really important was to just support people in their mindset and how they approached the job search and their careers during the pandemic. So yeah, I'm not
Thank
sure
you.
if I answered every aspect of your question. Let me know if I missed anything.
Yeah, I know it's a lot, but yeah, I mean that's that's helpful. Just maybe one follow-up question. Do you think that overall anxiety levels, have risen since the start of the pandemic, and uh, how's the overall state of mental health with your clients?
Mm. So overall, I would say it's probably a little bit of a roller coaster. I think everyone had a bit of a roller coaster ride and has been having a roller coaster ride since last March. I think it's like that. Definitely the career field boomed, the mental health field boomed. So I find that's important in people like reaching out and getting that kind of support. There's a piece of your question, sorry, at the end that I just slipped my mind. If you can just repeat that part so I can answer it.
Yeah, so how's the overall, I would say, mental
Oh, the
health,
anxiety.
yeah, the anxiety part, yeah.
Yeah, I think there has been a lot of anxiety, a lot of anxiety, and anxiety is connected to like worry and fear. And there was a lot of anxiety at the beginning, which I think maybe there's lessen because it seems like people are a little bit more hopeful right now with the vaccine coming out. But I think that there's still a piece of the unknown. And when people are faced with the unknown and they're not comfortable with that, because many people are in careers where they've been in their career for so long that it's just like this feeling of stability or certainty for tomorrow. And I think that COVID just shook things up for people. So there's definitely a rise in anxiety in terms of like what's going to happen next. Am I going to find a job? Um, yeah, I think it's like that whole worry has definitely increased people's anxiety in general.
Thank you, Priscilla. And quite a different situation in the UK, where Lionel is based. So Lionel, I think same questions for you, and if you could maybe add the more European point of view. Um, so how is it? How's life been?
No, so I think the first thing I'll say is that I'm really grateful to still have a job and be in good health. As Priscilla mentioned, it's really been a tough time the last 12 months for everyone. And just to give everybody some context, so I weathered the pandemic in London with my partner. So we have no kids. We do have a cat. So just kind of to set things in context. And as Sanjay said, I work for a private equity fund, so the largest Africa PE fund in globally. So when I think about how it's changed my life, I think it did have some implication. I think first is really on the type of work that I do. It involves speaking to management teams, going on the ground and doing some due diligence. So that's obviously things that you go, you travel. So I think given the lack of possibility of traveling, you have to kind of figure out some more creative way of doing due diligence. So that's relying on people on the ground, relying on your network, and really being more surgical as to what you think is important and what is less important when you're looking at doing due diligence in a company. I think the other thing I would say is a lot of the learning is actually quite unstructured. So it's those hallway conversation. You just go and you have an idea and you speak to the guy next door. You say, hey, look, I think we should look into this. Do you think it's a good idea? Or you get the thoughts from the partner that has years of experience. I think those situations happen a little bit less when you're working outside of the office. So it's been a bit of a challenge to really try to still instill that mentality of that unstructured learning and that camaraderie. So I think that's probably those 2 points are probably where there's been some evolution and where we kind of need to do a little bit to make some changes to still get those elements in the day to day.
And so how so you mentioned interacting with with your coworkers, your partners. and you mentioned, your network as well. But how do you, you know, how do you, how do you, maintain and expand, that network, especially when you've potentially never met, I mean, those people, and, making introductions might be maybe a bit harder. I mean, you don't bump into people at the office. There's no small talk. You know, eh, how do you actually develop on that network? Because I mean, I think quite a bit of the audience, is potentially looking for a change right now. And how do you connect with people, that have somewhat of a stake in what you do, or are knowledge experts?
I think it's a very good question, and I think really this pandemic is forcing us to be a little bit more creative. So I just say, before you could just go for coffee with someone, bumped into them on the street, but I think today, really kind of speaking to them, the emails and the online tools are really the prevalent way. So I think something that people have been doing, and then people have reached out to me through LinkedIn, people have reached out to me through email. So I think it's definitely people have more time actually to give to others, given that you're spending less time commuting, you're more at home. So I actually find it a little bit easier to set up calls with people all over the globe. So I think one way is really trying to really expand your horizons. Who are the new people that you can get in touch with, but also focusing on people that you already know. You've been to university. There's been maybe those contacts you haven't spoken to the last 5 and 6 years. So just take the time. Build a list of contact, build a list of people of experience you feel that you're looking at, and say, hey, maybe every week what I'll try to do is on Wednesday between 6 and 7, try to have a conversation with someone, because you'll find people have time. People have more time on their hands, I think, on average. So you kind of try to kind of think of creative ways. So one way is to reach out, but second as well is to create some content to other people. I think, one thing I've seen is people, let's say people want to go into investing. A lot of people have decided, look, I'm going to have the time. Let me just maybe look at one or two companies, prepare some write-ups, and then send it to people, just to show, going that extra step that really shows the passion. I think it goes a long way in the current environment.
So, you meet, the people you're working with, I guess, on Zoom, or, Google Meet, or whatever platform. But with the people you deal with at work, I mean, that's my personal experience, but could be different with you. But I noticed that, when you go on a Zoom meeting, for example, you're scheduled to talk about this, a specific subject, but then you don't necessarily, have a chance to get the person on a more personal level. Um, just because you're so focused on business. And have you experienced that? I mean, did you find any ways to connect on a more personal level with people you interact with virtually?
Yeah, so it's definitely been a challenge. I think, one thing that we've tried to do at Helios is have, weekly or bi-weekly chats with very informal. So on a Friday evening, people, 10, 15 people just join, and we can chit chat, kind of reproduce that water cooler atmosphere in the office. So that's one thing. With the partners as well, the more senior people, where maybe this type of catch up is a bit more difficult. So what I've tried to do personally is it's having more impromptu discussions before starting any meeting, really focusing, taking 1 or 2 minutes, just thinking about how to be dealing with the pandemic, how the families are doing. And, as you build those relationships, as you ask a question, one, you get to know more about the people, about their families and how they're doing. And then two, it's also a recurring theme. Like, you kind of learn more things. Say, hey, by the way, I remember, last weekend you mentioned and you were helping your daughter do maths. How is that going? So just trying to build that relationship, and being able to picking about a compound over time, it just makes it a little bit more organic.
Got it. Well, thank you. Thank you for your insights, Lionel. So, again, quite a bit of changed over last year. Um, troubled times, there's hope with, vaccination, but timeline is quite, uncertain. Um, but how can we, I would say, reframe our thinking and see, that period as an opportunity for, new horizons, transitions, reinventions, becoming maybe a better person. Over to you, Priscilla.
Okay, so you were just saying about, just to be clear about your question, you're just wondering, like, for people right now, if they want to redirect, what would be the best option?
Yeah, I mean, how can we, I would say, change our mindset and, maybe, you know, make the most of that, of the COVID situation to maybe better yourself, especially for the ones who want to make a transition in their careers or their lives even.
Mhm. So definitely the mindset piece is also to be aware of how you're already approaching the situation, right? If we're looking at this situation as, I think one of, unfortunately, a mistake people have done during COVID is anticipating tomorrow, right? Which is something we have a tendency of doing that even without COVID, of anticipating tomorrow. But what happens when we're anticipating tomorrow is that we're now living in the future instead of staying in the present. And our present current situation is that this is actually what's happening in our lives right now. Right. So first we need to acknowledge, like, this is the current situation and this is the current reality. And then based on that, then you can decide, okay, well, what are the things that maybe I had in place before COVID that I'm not really able to do now, but that I would like to continue doing. So just to bring in what Lionel was saying, because a lot of, like, career transition is, yes, there's a piece of what do I want to do next, but there is a very big piece of the networking that comes to play. And the networking, like you were saying, is like, it was very easy before to be meeting in the hallway, et cetera. But I want to bring in, like, what about the job seeker who isn't looking to necessarily build a network, be like in the workplace, or who's concerned that they do want to have that conversation about switching careers, but maybe they don't want to have that conversation in the workplace, right? So when we want to look at career transitions, it's a good idea, if we, especially if we already know what we would like to transition in, to start building a network with people who are already in that field. So I've really encouraged my clients to definitely network. Like, when it comes to the job search, I actually tell them to move away from applying online, like maybe spend an hour or two a week, and then really focus on connecting, but connecting genuinely. So really reaching out to people that you actually really want to get to know, because the way I see building professional relationships is actually building lasting relationships. So you're not just connecting with people just for gathering of information or getting the next job. You're actually connecting with people because you want to actually have them in your life, and then they're a professional in your life that you can bounce ideas off or reach out to here and there. And so a lot of the networking I've been doing now, like you guys were saying, is I have reached out to people that I've known maybe 2 or 3 or 4 years ago, and just jumped on Zooms and had, like, that conversation about how are things going right now, considering the current situation. In terms of bettering yourself, I really put a lot of emphasis on self-care, right? And that has been in, like, the world of wellness for a while. And I think that the tricky part about self-care is that not everyone really understands what is self-care. And I like to take the lens around self-care around self-love. And that's something, again, that people have a tendency, it's difficult for them to wrap their head around it. And when I bring self-love into the conversation, especially when it comes to career and loving your career, it's about, for those people out there who are waking up and they're hating their career, when you reflect on someone that you really love and care about, would you want them waking up every day feeling the way that maybe you feel around the career that you dislike, right? Sometimes I speak to clients, and, like, personally, I have experienced that Sunday, like, dread of, oh no, I, like, tomorrow's Monday, or like that anticipation on Friday. And it's like, but if you really love yourself, like, would you actually put yourself through that? Right? Or sometimes when we look at the career setting, it's like, I hear these stories of people who are experiencing harassment, and we're talking about here, with the McGill Black Association, Black Alumni Association, is like, we are Black in this reality. And the reality is that there is discrimination and there is racism in the workplace. So bettering yourself is taking the time to step away from maybe any toxicity happening in the workplace to say, well, what are my strengths? What am I really good at? And let's actually explore finding that in an environment that's actually really going to value who I am as an individual and as a professional. Right. And I always, when I work with my clients, like I always see what they already have, their strengths and their potential. And I find it's really important for each person to develop that self-awareness so they can see it too. Because once you see it, that's what can really start opening doors in terms of the conversations that you're having, in terms of the confidence that you'll be showing up at with during your interviews and etc.
So, you mentioned, interviewing and, over to you, Lionel. How has the hiring process, I mean, for companies, changed in the new reality? So most interviews are taking place, over Zoom and, over software like that. But, how has it changed? Is making an online application without networking actually, that effective? I don't know how it is in the UK. And how do you see, recruiting post-COVID? Uh, how has it changed? And I guess, like, I mean, for those who, want to recruit maybe globally, are there any potential roadblocks that you could be facing right now?
I think it's a good question, and I think you need to look at it from a couple's perspective. I think the first one is really from the company's perspective. So whoever is hiring, I think for them they probably have a wider pool of talent that they can reach out to. I think people are becoming more and more flexible as to the physical location of their employees. So if I'm sitting in London, I'm more open to hiring someone that could potentially work from Barcelona or could work from Madrid or from Copenhagen. So and look at it from the applicant's perspective, I think a lot of it is going to be online, as you say. So you kind of lose that, being in a room with someone, shaking their hands and everything. So I think everyone is trying as best to replicate that interaction. So I think from my perspective, what I've seen is really the type of being maybe going to the specifics, the type of questions or the types of interviews haven't really changed. But I think the number of people that have to speak to the potential hires has actually expanded, because I think, given you don't have that, those physical meetings, I think you just need to have more and more people just making sure that you're not potentially making a mistake on the culture, on the fit. So I think it's more people that you need to go through in order to get a job.
So, I mean, if you're a job seeker right now, say you've been, laid off, because of a pandemic or for whatever reason, and you're running out, say, on, employment insurance and the likes. So, what's the best way, actually get a job? Is it still through networking, or is it just, applying online right now? I mean, how should the, how is what's the most effective way in a in a COVID situation to get a job?
I think it's a very good question, and it's a tough one to answer. I think I echo a lot of what Priscilla has said, which is, networking, but networking in the sense of actually reaching out and making connection with the people that are in the field that you want to go into, but also looking at it as long-term relationships. I think, some of the things I've seen is people, reaching out through Twitter, being in those communities, trying to really put some content out there as a way to differentiate themselves. I think the first thing I would do is really take a step back and really try to figure out what is it actually that I want to do. I think, the pandemic in a way has given us time to maybe more reflect, remind us of what are our core values, and it's really an opportune time to look inwards and revisit our goals. So I think once you kind of manage to be clear as to what is your goal, you can then kind of figure out, okay, what are the people in the field that I want to get into? What have they done? Because people have had their journey, so you can always see when looking through LinkedIn or talking to your network, what are the different steps that people have taken in order to get to the place that they wanted. You can try to back source from there. But I think that's one way, speaking to people. And I think Another way to look at it as well is really say, look, how can I prove to the potential employee that I can hit the ground running from day one? And that goes back to the point that, is there a way I can show that I will be good to go from day one? Can I show them, if I want to do a job in marketing, can I give them some potential ideas on a marketing strategy? So really tell them that you're passionate about what you're looking for, and you're doing the extra work because you have a little bit more time to hit the ground running from day one.
And quite a bit of people, have taken, some time during the pandemic to upskill on, on different platforms like edX, Coursera, LinkedIn courses. How valuable are those when you actually put them on a resume? Do they have the same credibility as, say, oh, well, I took, some certificate, in person at a certain school? How valuable are those, or at least how are they perceived?
I think the way I see it is it's very easy to confuse being busy and being productive. I think it goes back to the point, you need to figure out what is actually your true north, and then solve back. If you want to be a coder, right? I think there's definitely some benefits of getting an online accreditation to show that to the professional employees, look, this shows that I can do exactly what I need to do to get this job, which is to code a different language. But I do think before jumping into online courses, we need to think hard. Is it actually going to be helpful? Is that something that would help me differentiate myself? Because if you think about it, if everybody is doing online courses, so how are you going to stand out vis-a-vis the other 100 or 200 people that have done those online courses? Is a very better way to do it, to actually produce something that will be helpful for the company from day one, to show them that you're actually thinking ahead, you're coming up with ideas, you've had this time to reflect, and you can be value added from day one.
So, you mentioned reflection, and Priscilla, you mentioned, strengths before. But since a lot of us are, quite isolated, you can't, you meet a friend at a restaurant, for example. Um, when you're alone, like, how do you, I mean, have you come up with, I would say, effective ways or methods to identify your own strengths without necessarily relying on, other people to maybe to identify those? And, how do you communicate that effectively in a job search without sending maybe, to cocky, if I can say, or without necessarily having quantifiable data to back it up?
Okay. So the thing about, I would think that even though we're alone, some of us are alone right now, we have been in the setting of being in the workplace or communicating. Like, we can still communicate with our friends. A simple thing you can do is just reach out to friends or colleagues and ask them, what have you noticed that I'm actually really good at? And most of the time, our strongest skills, or even I make the distinction between skills and talents. So I see skills as, those skills that everyone can pick up in the workplace if they're put in a situation where they have to put them into practice. And I see talent as something that you're just really, really good at. And often the talents are things that we are so good at it comes so easily to us that we disregard it. Right? Or when someone tells us, oh my goodness, you're so good at that, we kind of brush it off because we're like, well, that was super easy. And it's like this assumption that that was just so easy that anyone and everyone can do it. And I would encourage people to start paying attention to that, because chances are that it's actually something that's very unique to you. And that's why people are often telling you, oh, you're really good at that. So that would be a moment of reflection to identify those talents. So I would see strengths as talents. Another thing about strengths that people struggle with is that it just, because it's so easy, you actually have fun doing it. And there's this weird belief that work should be hard or work should be stressful or I shouldn't be enjoying work. And I really want to break down that status quo, because work can be fun. You can actually love what you're doing. You can actually completely lose yourself in work. And often it's when you're using those strengths and your talents. So going back to even your current position and identifying, oh, okay, when are those moments when I'm just having such a good time, I don't see the time go by? Or what are those things that I really enjoy in the workplace? I would start jotting those down as your strengths. Now, when you're trying to communicate that in the job search, then once you've identified those strengths, you want to start plugging in stories, accomplishments. So when you think about those strengths, what has those strengths allowed you to actually accomplish in the workplace? And I mean, it's a little bit like usually for the resumes, for example, if somebody wants to really write a resume that's going to get noticed, then I would have like a coaching session with them and be really drilling them and asking them a lot of questions for them to start realizing, oh, this is actually, these are my strengths, this is what I've accomplished, and actually putting that into their resume in a way that somebody who's briefly reading the resume would pay attention to that. And just to answer the question you asked, Lionel, yes, I totally encourage people, if there is like a skill that you want to develop and you see it in those online courses, then definitely put that on your resume, especially if you want to transition into maybe a field or a position where you might be lacking confidence in the skills that you have. That can definitely be an option.
And what, Priscilla, what have you noticed, among your clients? What's the biggest hurdle usually for them when they try to, to get a new job in a COVID world,
Mm.
or, when they try to transition? So what's the most difficult part?
I think it's a lack of confidence and the mindset. So often when I work with my clients, it's either, not really believing in themselves. So I find that that's where when I can drill them around the resume, then all of a sudden they start remembering what they have accomplished, and so can bring it to the forefront. So it's really helping my clients see what they have actually accomplished, because often we're not always able to see what we've accomplished, or sometimes we lack the confidence to really bring that forward in an interview, to be like, oh, but I've done that. Or, some people will tell me, well, I don't want to brag. And I always tell them, you're not actually bragging, you're sharing facts. Like if this is something that you've actually accomplished in the workplace, it's not well, I mean, it is a brag. And I would say like brag proudly. But if you are uncomfortable with just, seeing it as a brag, then present it as a fact. Right? I did this is how I did it, and this is the outcome of what happened.
And have you seen any, especially when someone tries to transition, in a new field, what I've read online is that a lot of people, are kind of hesitant to ask for help.
Mm.
Is that something that you've also seen, with your clients?
Yeah, I think, well, not with my clients because they're asking for help. So,
Right.
and I think, you know, I think that's the problem, is people don't want to ask for help. And often, I think especially for people of color, there's like this ego driven, like I should be able to do this by myself. I should be able to prove myself. And I'm like, no, nobody who's succeeded in any way, shape, or form in this world has ever done it by themselves. There is always somebody beside them, somebody cheering them on, somebody like encouraging them. And I say it's so important to have that person by your side, whoever it is that you choose, that it be a coach or just a friend, and just making sure that you really choose someone who has a positive mindset, because it's very easy, especially when you want to transition and you want to transition during COVID. People might sway you and say, oh, are there any jobs out there? I mean, the media loves cultivating fear in people and saying there aren't any jobs out there, like the economy. And I'm not saying that that's not what's happening. I'm just saying that it's not all that's happening. So if you can step away from the noise of fear, then you have someone who's there, who's positive, who's cheering you on, then I think anything is possible, even during COVID.
All right, thank you so much, Lionel and Priscilla, for the insights. And we're gonna open up for Q&A right now. So everyone, please submit your questions on the chat if you have any. We have a question from Samra Lekyu. While networking and interviewing, how can you identify potential workplaces that are, non-toxic for, Black professionals?
I'd love to answer that. That's definitely been something that has been coming up and that I have had discussions about with clients. So that's why I push for the networking. Because when you are unfortunately stuck behind a screen just sending resumes online, then you're not really getting, I say, like the insider's point of view of a company. When you're networking, you're building a connection, you're building a relationship, and then there are more chances that people you're speaking with will open up about their experience working in an environment. So that's one thing. It's either you actually speak to people of color in that environment and you're like, so how's your experience there? How do they treat people of color? What are their policies, etc.? Like, you can really ask those questions. And also, even if you're not speaking to a person of color, like when you're speaking to even in the interview, so it's just about asking questions. You need to identify what is important for me stepping into a new environment, and you need to have those questions ready, open-ended questions. So what do you have in place to make sure that this is a safe space for your Black employees? And I know that that comes across as such a forward question, but if you can't ask that kind of question in the work environment and they're not able to answer it, then why would you want to step into that work environment? And I'm so I'm all about loving your career, feeling comfortable in your workplace, being able to be authentic and yourself in your workplace. So I do challenge that. And I challenge people to create a space that you love going to, and create a space that's so comfortable for you that you can show up as whoever you are in that workplace. And so it's about asking the questions. And I always love comparing looking for work with relationships. And I always say, well, in a relationship, there's always that moment where you're going to ask those difficult questions to make sure that the partner is sharing the same values or has the same vision. And it's the same thing for the workplace. You're going to be potentially spending years working in that environment. You want to have a good experience. You want to stay, basically.
And Lionel, any thoughts?
Well, look, I couldn't agree more with what Priscilla just said. I think you're not going to get a better answer and from the insiders. So really, do the best you can to speak to people of color in those organizations and ask them for an honest opinion as to how their journey has been at the firm. I think it's just really important. I think we spend so much time in our life thinking about work, doing work, that we really need to make sure that we're in the right environment, because again, coming back to the world we're living today, I mean, it can lead to very very difficult situations. So I think wholeheartedly agree with what Priscilla just said. You really need to do that work and figure out which places are not toxic environments.
So I have a question here from Erin. So I'm a lawyer and have a specific skill set. How do you approach a career transition when you will not necessarily have technical skills in a new area, but how to leverage your soft skills and your ability to learn new things? So I think that's centered around, reinvention. I know, at least in finance, quite a few lawyers have become bankers or other investment professionals. Uh, how do you, how do you actually make someone, believe in you, and take a chance on you? Priscilla, maybe first.
First, I'd say start with your confidence in yourself and your belief in yourself, right? If you're confident and you have the belief in yourself, when you're having that conversation, they're just going to buy into you. That would be one. In terms of the transferring the skills, it's always about doing your research and your homework. If you know what you want to transition into, then really researching that field to find out, well, what are some of the skills that are needed in that field? So then you can look at, okay, what have I done as a lawyer that now can be transferred into that new field? When you do your networking, you can also find out, you can find out, are there any gaps? Are there things that I have not developed that maybe I need to do additional training, or find ways in my current work situation to bring in those skills or bring in those types of projects that I can work with. So it's really, and honestly, based on the thousands of resumes I have read and the conversations I have had with clients, I always say, even if I haven't met people, I know that you already have everything you need to transition into that new career. Because when we feel like that tug to transition into something else, I see it as like a greater calling. And you wouldn't have that greater calling if you didn't have what it took to step into that role. Now, obviously, there are certain callings that require, like, I had to go back to school for my personal calling. That's when I went back to McGill and got my master's in counseling psychology. But sometimes you can just literally like transition. It's just if you have the right career coach who really understands how to translate what you've done into what you want to do, then it's just like retailoring your resume. And I have seen magic happen. Just being able to express what have I done and putting that into paper in a powerful way.
Lionel?
Yeah, I think it's a very good question, and again, I think the point that Priscilla made around doing your homework. So the way I would approach it is maybe first look at what are the different skills that are needed for that position, right? So those are maybe the two, three, four things that they want you to have. Then what are my experiences that I've had in my career that convey those skills, right? I think you can say, look, if you're looking to go from a job as a lawyer to a job as a finance, I think different elements such as attention to detail, ability to talk to clients, those are things that you can easily translate from one field to the other. Then you need to figure out, okay, what are some of the areas where I have a gap? And this is where we go back to the point where do I need to upskill or not, right? And I think really how you can transcend those potential issues is really to show the passion and show the ability to learn, because people, what I think, they want to hire you for your potential, but you need to show them that you have confidence in yourself and you also have the passion to really narrow that potential gap between the skill set the job requires and the skill set that you have gotten from your previous job. And I said the last point is, if you're trying to transition, then you have a whole different set of experiences that are quite unique to you. So you say, how can the combination of my previous job and my new job work for me? Because you're going to just leverage what you would leverage your history. Just say, look, you're getting a unique combination of someone who's done something different that equals different perspective, different opinion, right? And on top of that, you have someone that's so passionate about this transition that you're going to do everything you can to take on the new skills and to learn as much as you can. So I think that combination can be really, really powerful.
Thank you. So I don't know if we have any other questions. Let me look. There's a question here about helping other Black professionals in the workplace. How do you go about it? Especially when unfortunately you're not working in a very supportive place towards minorities.
I saw maybe
Yeah.
we can ask Bertina if you want to be more specific about the specific question, but um, I think that that's the reality when you're networking, is that you're going to get a no. And I think that what's important when you're getting those no's is not to go more too into like why they don't want to help. It's more like, okay, that's a no. And an acronym for no is next opportunity. So then you just keep on looking for someone who wants to support you, because there are definitely people out there who do want to help, who want to see other Black professionals strive, who want to just share, who want to support. And it's just really about finding these people. At times, you will find yourself in work environments that aren't the healthiest places for you. And I think that that can still be a learning experience, that can still be, there can still be a lot of growth in that situation. And then not being afraid to leave again. I think sometimes we We're so concerned about what are people going to say if they think they see only 2 or 3 months on my resume, or what are people going to say if this or that. And we need to go beyond that. So really that's like the mindset, because there's so many myths around the job search that tend to guide our job seeking behaviors. So I always encourage people to question that and to be like, is it really true? And if I always put your wellness first, and so if I'm putting your wellness first, it's like, if you are not, like if you accidentally find yourself in a work environment that's just not healthy for you, it's like, okay, what is the what's the action plan that can be put into place, and what is your timeline to remove yourself from that situation? And while you're still there, again, how do you make the best of it? How do you develop specific skills? How do you maybe work on specific projects that they're available to you, for you to build that, to then build on that, to step into then the next best role?
Thank you, Priscilla, and maybe Lionel. You know, uh, how I mean, we are 10 minutes before the end. And how maybe do you have any maybe last piece of advice, for those of us who are looking for new opportunities right now, and those who who want to transition to a new field, and more broadly for anyone experiencing some kind of professional difficulty right now.
Yeah, so I think what I would say is really try to use this as an opportunity to refresh. Take a step back, try to think about what is my 10-year plan, and just say, okay, am I actually on the right track, or do I want to do something different? Try to think about your CV so far. So what are the different jobs or the different particularity of a specific job that you enjoyed, right? So what is a great day of work entails for you? To write it down, and then try to speak to the network, as we were discussing before, to try to figure out if there are any opportunities, any job that actually fits with what you're looking for. I think it's really important in this world to really live an authentic life. So don't compromise in the workplace, and really find somewhere where you think you're at home, where you don't need to compromise for who you are, because that's not going to change. I think as we know. So I think, yeah, use the opportunity to refresh your goals, network, try to get new habits that will get you to where you want to go to, and don't compromise.
Thank you. Priscilla, we have a question for you. So what kind of advice do you have for someone who is, looking for a career coach? Like, how do you find the right one? How do you ensure that, personalities match? Any call on that?
So usually they're going to offer a free inquiry call. So I do that. So I jump on a call with the potential client. I have specific questions I have for them. Maybe they have questions for me. And really the idea is, you want to make sure that you know what you're looking for, and that what that career coach offers is going to help you reach that goal. Another thing is, it's really about, is it a good match? When you're building relationships, when we meet people, we kind of know if we want to pursue like a longer term like connection or not with anyone we meet in our life. So I think that taking the time during that call to really check in with yourself, to say, okay, would I actually really want to work with this person? Do I trust that this person can support me in reaching my goals? I think would be really important. And yeah, that's what I would say. Like, you just really have to listen to yourself, because there are always going to be questions about, oh, is this right for me? Is this wrong for me? And I think that you listen to your gut, which can be very challenging at times. And if listening to the gut is challenging, then look at, okay, what do I want? What is this person offering? And do those go hand in hand? You can also ask the career coach if they have like the successes that their clients have had in the past. Usually there's some testimonials. I've had some clients ask me if they could actually speak to past clients. So there are definitely different ways to see if it's a good fit. And usually what I like to leave people with, like as a last comment, is clarity. Right. A lot of people just jump into the job search and they don't actually know what they're looking for. And you can lose a lot of months looking for a position if you don't have that clarity. So I say, take the time to get super, super clear about what you want. And once you have that clarity, then it becomes a lot easier. And then what the career coach can be is, again, that can be your sidekick and your cheerleader, pushing you through maybe obstacles that usually you might not take that action. Then you're being held accountable, and all of a sudden you're doing things that you never thought you'd be doing.
So maybe it's a question actually from me, Priscilla. What's the distinction and where's the line between between a career coach and the mentor?
Career coach and mentor. Yeah. So definitely, I mean, the way I see mentoring is more that you might want to be stepping into a similar role as the other person, and they've had their experiences, they've done their mistakes, or they know what works, and they might be able to guide you in your own growth in that work or in that field. Whereas I find that the career coach, where it gets a little bit more professional, where it now falls into career coaching, is where it's like it's not like you don't want to step, for example, into the career coach role. It's just that you have some career goals that you want to reach. You're aware that maybe there's some resistance or there's some obstacles, or you've been struggling for a really long time, you don't understand why. And then the career coach, with their experience and expertise, will help you either work through what's going on within, or help you reach your goals. Now, every career coach is different. I have a very holistic approach. Some career coaches are going to focus more on your career, how to advance in your career. For me, it's more, you're unhappy in your career, you're not where you really want to be, you want that more fulfillment and happiness, and you want to love your career. And that's where I offer the support.
So Lionel, we have maybe the last question for the session. So what's the best way? I mean, say when someone is, entering a new field and that person has, a few years of experience, behind him or her, what's the best way to prove that, you're actually worth more than an entry-level salary when jumping into a new field?
It's a good question. I think the way people tend to do it is use benchmarking. So they would say, look, let me actually speak to a couple of headhunters that have potential data points of people that have made the same career trajectory, and then try to show to whoever is speaking to that those are the numbers that the people have had. I think that's number one. And number two as well, you can be quite open to people you're speaking to about what you were earning in your previous job, given your qualification, and just say, hey, look, I'm actually not an entry level employee because I bring X, Y, and Z to the table, and presumably I should also get some compensation for that. So I think it's a combination of really showing tangible data points and also more qualitative of selling your previous experience.
Thank you. Well, I wanted to thank you both for all the great insights that you've shared with us today. Over to Sandrine.
Thank you, Johan, for guiding and moderating the great discussion. Thank you, Priscilla and Lionel, for all of your insights. And thank you to you, the audience, and the participants, for being so engaging. And it was a really, really great session. And of course, thank you to the CATS team from CATS and the MBAA. Thank you for joining us. And we really encourage you to stay connected with the MBAA through our LinkedIn group, Bengal Black Alumni Association, on Facebook, as well as on Twitter. I believe some links will be shared in the next few minutes in the chat to stay connected with us.
And I want to thank everyone also for having me on this call. It was very great. I was glad to be able to share my knowledge with all of you.
Same here. It was a great discussion, and I hope we'll manage to send some helpful feedback for everyone.
Thank you so much.